So my mom went and got Maddie and brought her into the bedroom, and I kneeled down before her and I said, honey, I'm so sorry, but your daddy went to see the Lord. He's in heaven. And she, this is the most amazing thing. She looked at me. She's 10 years old at the time. And she looked at me and she goes, Mom, it's okay. She leaned over and gave me a big hug, squeezed me tight, and she says, Jesus has been preparing me for this day. And I was taken back. I said, honey, what do you mean? She goes, I don't know, but I can tell you that Jesus has been preparing me and it's going to be okay.
Welcome. You're listening to the radio podcast of Voices of a Woman from Creative Encouragement Ministries. This program focuses on giving women a voice to share their stories and how the Lord brought them through challenging situations to live above their circumstances. I hope that this conversation will encourage you and offer you hope in your own journey. Hi, this is Leanna Wilson. I'm your host, and you're listening to Voices of a Woman. My guest today is a wife, mother, realtor, and now a pastor's wife. She grew up in the DFW area and moved to Amarillo in 1998 after graduating high school and met her first husband in the fall of that same year. They married in the summer of 1999, and in 2011, she had her first pregnancy, which ended in a miscarriage, but 2 months later, got pregnant again and had her daughter, who is now 13. She homeschooled her daughter up until her first husband passed away in 2023. After his death, she got into real estate full-time. She then met her now husband in February of 2024. Her ministry connection is being a pastor's wife. The Lord had them take over a small congregation in April of 2025, and now they pastor Generations Church in Aransas Pass. Welcome my guest today, Theresa Theriot.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Leanna.
Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you joining me. And we've known each other for a few years through homeschooling,
Right.
And you have been, honestly, I'm going to say, just an encouragement to me. How the Lord came up with the name for Creative Encouragement Ministries. We were having a conversation one day at the park. Do you remember that?
I remember that, yes.
And you said, hey, you should do this little encouragement thing. And I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, I just slept on it that night. And I woke up the next morning and the Lord said, name it Creative Encouragement. And I was like, name what? Creative Encouragement. And then that's what catapulted the name of the ministry. Thank you for being obedient to the Lord.
You're welcome. I had no idea that's what the Lord had in store for you, but I'm so thankful and I'm glad to be a part of that.
And I'm glad that I didn't know at the time what the Lord had in store for me, because I probably would have said, no, I don't want to do that. So,
right.
So I'm so glad you're with us today. You've seen God's faithfulness in your life with a lot of really great times and some really painful times. And we're really going to kind of dive into that conversation. So let's go back. Where were you raised and what was kind of going on in that time?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Garland, Texas, and raised in and around the Hearst, Euless, Bedford area of the Metroplex, the DFW Metroplex. I lived with my mom, and she was a single mom, so my mother and father divorced when I was 2 years old. So I didn't have a dad growing up in the household with me. My mother remarried and gave birth to my sister, who is now, they're all living together in Salina, Texas. They're still in that region. But I grew up there, went to school there, graduated high school in Colleyville Heritage High School. And yeah, it was just us three girls, basically, for my entire childhood up until I graduated high school when I moved.
So it was a lot of fun with three girls. I had two sisters as well, so I get it.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily say fun.
It's a lot of drama, right, with girls.
Well, absolutely. My sister and I, if you looked up the definition of sibling rivalry, you would see our names beside. And my mother, bless her heart, she did the very best that she could, being a single mom, working several jobs to support us. But my sister and I were about 6 years apart, and we just butted heads pretty much our entire upbringing. It was sad. There was a comparison that I was always the angel and she was always the devil. I mean, our two personalities were just completely opposite. She's great now and we're good. But yeah, growing up wasn't so easy.
So kind of what was going on in those early years when you were growing up? How was that developing you into a young woman? I mean, how did that affect you?
growing up, being in a home that didn't have a father in it, it was difficult, right? I didn't have a godly male figure in my life to look up to in the home. But I will say this, my dad is a wonderful man of God, and he definitely helped raise me from afar. And by that, I mean, he prayed a lot. And it wasn't until later in life that I really realized how much he had actually been praying for me, because I could see now as an adult how the Lord saved me from a lot of heartache. And I believe it really was because of him praying for me. My mom did an amazing job that she could do on her own. She was not following the Lord at the time that I was in the home with her. And so I grew up being the only Christian in my home. And I've been a Christian ever since I was a young kid, thanks to my dad. He was the one who introduced me to Christ and taught me how to live for him. And so I gained a lot of, I don't know if you call it backbone, but I learned how to live in a house that rejected the religion that I claimed to profess. So that was difficult at times, but I didn't let it persuade me. Yeah. And I continued on.
So that was was there a battle that was kind of going
on? At times, I know that there was times where my mom would say, "Oh, stop being so fanatical about Jesus like your dad." And that was one of the reasons why I believe that they separated, was because this was right around the time there was a big Jesus movement and the charismatic movement had taken off. And my mom was raised Southern Baptist, and it just wasn't her cup of tea. And so there was a lot of struggle there. And I think that my enthusiasm and my zeal for the Lord reminded her of that. And so she didn't attend church with me. She made sure I got there, thank the Lord.
That's good.
It wasn't anything she participated in with me.
So she would take you and drop you off.
Yes.
But you
or
would
either that, or I had friends that would come pick me up. I had a dear lady that actually lived right next door to me who I just loved so much. And she was a Christian. And so I actually ended up going to their church. And she would take me all the time. And that's how I would get there.
So you learned to be strong so early, just because that wasn't even training in your household, I guess, right? You said your dad introduced you to Christ. Was there like a defining moment when you were younger that really happened?
Yeah. So I remember the first time that I had an encounter with the Lord, and I was actually 5 years old. I was really young.
Wow. Okay.
My dad brought me into the room, and this was, back in the early 80s. So we had cassette tapes.
I remember the cassette tapes. Yes, I do.
Right. And he goes, "I want you to listen to this song." And he turned on "He's Alive" by Don Francisco.
Oh, I love that song. Yes.
Yes. And he had me listen to this song, and I just get chills thinking about it. But I had an encounter with the Lord that day, and I believe the Holy Spirit touched me in that moment when I was listening to that song. And I just fell to my knees and raised my hands and began to weep as 5 years old. And I just wasn't the same ever since.
That is so awesome. So God, you just encountered the Lord. I always tell people you can be raised in church your whole life or taught about the Lord, but it's until you encounter him. Mm-hmm. That is the defining moment.
Yes.
So as you were growing up, what were some of the things that you were struggling with when you were young? Aside from, okay, well, my mom isn't serving the Lord at the moment. Mm-hmm. What was going on?
Well, I talked about not having the father in the home, and that played a huge role in my upbringing. There was a lot of things that I felt like I missed out on having a dad in the home, and I was given a lot of freedom by my mom, and thankfully she trusted me. And I was, for all intents and purposes, I was a pretty good girl. I didn't get into a lot of trouble. I did actually, during my middle school years, stray from the Lord, and because I was just discovering who I was.
Trying to figure things out, right?
Trying to figure things out. And so I got into a little bit of trouble. I would say that while thankfully I maintained my virginity all the way until marriage.
Hallelujah.
I came close a lot of times, and she never knew. And I used to always be really sad because I wanted boundaries, and I wasn't given the boundaries that I knew I was craving as a child. But that's where I said I believe that that my dad was praying, because it kept me out of a lot. I had the opportunity more than once to really damage my progress, and walk with the Lord and just getting into sin and things like that. I had a lot of opportunity, but I never took it. And there was always a way made out for me.
I find it very interesting you mentioned boundaries, because even though we say, hey, our children, we can't put too many boundaries, actually, they love boundaries. Yeah. I was having a conversation with my youngest son recently, and we put a boundary on him. And he was so relieved that we did that. And And it was a defining moment for me as a parent because I always put a lot of boundaries on my children. What's that saying? You give them enough rope that they don't hang themselves.
Right. Yes.
So, and I think children do need that. And I find that when you're mentioning that I wish I had stricter boundaries growing up as well. I grew up in the 80s, and it was sort of like a free-for-all sometimes. And there wasn't that, hey, we're keeping an eye on you. We need you to be in at this certain time or do this certain thing. Those were not put on me, and I kind of wish there was.
Right. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So we're going to fast forward. Now, you were married to George for 23 years, and he passed away suddenly in 2023. You want to go through some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, 23 years. I want to make mention that our relationship, the beginning was really good, but there, as always, it seems like life just throws curveballs at you. And so I think one of the major first curveballs that were thrown our way was infertility. And I struggled with that. And I knew graduating from high school exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get married and have babies. I knew before I graduated high school, I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to start a family. That was what my goals were. So I did that really quickly. I graduated in 98, and by 6 months later, I was already married, and I didn't hesitate. And I found out that I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and found out that it was going to be very difficult for me to conceive a child. That proved true because 13 years later, we were still trying.
Oh, okay.
And through the course of taking different types of medications, I was able to conceive our first child, which you mentioned earlier, ended up in a miscarriage at 6 weeks. And that was very difficult because here it is. I prayed for this child for so long. We both did. And then for it to just be taken away so soon. And I was like, why, Lord? Why is this happening? But he was faithful. And 2 months later, like I said, we got pregnant with Maddie. And she's now, a wonderful young lady. And so thankful for her. And so another curveball that was thrown our way was back in, if everybody remembers, the housing crisis of 2008.
Right. Yes, I do.
We owned a business in downtown Amarillo, and we were literally hanging on by a thread just to survive, to pay our bills. And we actually ended up filing for bankruptcy. Life had thrown some pretty big curveballs at us, and that did a work on our marriage, to be honest with you. So I wanted to preface all of that with some things that I'm going to say afterwards. But yes, so back in February of 2023, I had got a call from my mother, and she said that my stepdad was in the hospital, that he was having trouble breathing. And so they went in, and we discovered that he had congestive heart failure. And it was really a very fast thing. I mean, he was in for about a week before they were like, he's not going to make it. And so we didn't even have time to prepare for that. Right. And then he passed away. And I went up to Dallas to be with my mom so that I could help her mourn. And she was living in a house and was going to have to move out of that house and move in with my sister because on her own, she wasn't able to maintain the bills.
So she was like, husband died, having to move all within a real short period of time.
Very short period of time.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
I told George, my then husband, I said, I need to go be with her. I'll take Maddie with me. I was homeschooling her, so I said she can come with me and we'll do school up there while I help my mom pack up her house and get moved out. And I wanted to be there for the funeral and everything. And we were in such a time during our business to where my husband could not afford to take 3 weeks off because we were planning on being up there for several weeks. Him being the sole provider for our house, he decided to stay back and work. And so we left and we stayed up there for about 3 weeks. And every single day we would FaceTime him and he'd talk to Maddie and me and on the phone. And then the day before we were supposed to fly back home, I was trying to get a hold of him and I could not get a hold of him. He wasn't answering his phone. And it was not like him to do that. And he missed the good night call that we would normally have every night. I should say that, I'm sorry, it was the good morning call because then that whole day was in an effort to try to contact him. Long story short, we found out through doing a well check. We had to call the police to go out there to check on him.
Oh,
and they had discovered that he had passed away in the house. And I remember I was sitting on my sister's front porch and I actually had his brother go. I said, something is wrong. I can't get a hold of George. I need you to go check it out for me. So in the time that he left to go do that, I was calling to do a well check and I didn't hear anything for like the longest time. I think, gosh, it must have been almost an hour had passed before.
And that probably seems like an eternity, especially when you're not sure what's going on.
Right. So I'm sitting on my sister's front porch and my brother-in-law calls me and he says, it's the worst possible news. And and then in that moment, I just, of course, what do? You just cry out, no, 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 this cannot be happening. And of course, when my sister heard that, she knew that, he had passed. It was all a little bit of a blur from there. I remember going back into the house, and at this time, my daughter did not know what happened. So we went into my sister's bathroom, and I could just remember pacing back and forth, like just in shock.
Sure. Yeah.
And I actually remember falling to my knees and raising my hands and saying, God, I can't do this without you. There's no possible way. And I didn't know what else to do. I was like, you're going to have to speak for me. You're going to have to think for me. I don't know what to do. I need you to tell me what to do. And then I started realizing I'm going to have to tell my daughter. And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. Don't make me do it. I said, but I need you to speak through me because I've got to tell her. But I don't want to be emotional. I want to be able to clearly state what happened. And so my mom went and got Maddie and brought her into the bedroom. And I kneeled down before her and I said, honey, I'm so sorry, but your daddy went to see the Lord. He's in heaven. And this is the most amazing thing. She looked at me. She's 10 years old at the time. And she looked at me and she goes, Mom, it's okay. She leaned over and gave me a big hug, squeezed me tight. And she says, Jesus has been preparing me for this day. And I was taken back. I said, honey, what do you mean? She goes, I don't know, but I can tell you that Jesus has been preparing me and it's going to be okay.
Wow.
And the wisdom of a 10-year-old little girl,
wow.
The Lord just used her. And she also, and at this time I didn't quite think of it. And she said, Mom, don't you realize that we're going to see him in the blink of an eye again?
Wow. I tell you, them out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's beautiful.
It was so beautiful. And she actually was the one who reminded me, Mom, he's up there holding baby Hope. We had named the baby that we lost Hope.
Yes.
Because he had given us hope that we could have a baby. And she goes, he's up there holding Hope. And I melted. I was so thankful to the Lord for her. And in a moment where I should have been comforting her, she was comforting me.
That's beautiful. I tell you how neat that God does that. I mean, he sends the people and the Holy Spirit is there. I mean, oh goodness. I mean, I'm just sitting there like, oh, I don't even know what to say after that. It's just beautiful. So now, did George have any health struggles?
He did. He actually had quite a few. And that was part of the reason why, our relationship wasn't the best, because I knew he was struggling in his health and I wanted him so badly to go to the doctor. And because of the things that he had been through in life and the bankruptcy that had just wrecked us financially, he was like, I'm not going and putting my money at a doctor for them just to tell me they can't be fixed. And I think in his mind, he thought, well, if I don't go, they can't tell me what my condition is, and then it's not real. I think he...
Out of sight, out of mind, that
kind of thing. Out of sight, out of mind, right. And so he felt invincible, and he wasn't. He had fibromyalgia, we believe. Again, we don't know this for a fact, but all the symptoms and signs pointed to that. Neuropathy, and toward the end, he started to lose circulation because he was so cold all the time. And then I think that he actually, on top of that, we didn't realize it, but he had heart problems. Had we had gone to the doctor and discovered those things, he probably would still be here today with the help of, medical intervention.
Right.
But he was just being really stubborn and wouldn't go.
Now, was he also dealing with maybe some depression too?
Absolutely. George's story is amazing in and of itself. He was an immigrant from Guatemala, and he came from a very, actually a wealthy family there, and they had to escape the country because the government was after their money. And then coming to America, he'd been knocked down so many times and gotten back up that all of it just took a toll on him. The infertility took a toll, the bankruptcy took a toll, and he was struggling with depression. I remember a time where I was going through a small season of depression in my life, and I tried to talk to him about it. And he came into the room and he goes, well, now you know how I feel every day.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, man, it's really sad. He was not in any condition as my husband to help me through my depression because he was so deep in his.
And then you think you compound that with health problems alone. I know when I've been sick, I don't really want to talk to anybody, right? I mean, that's
right. Well,
so compounding on that as well, all the other things.
He was in pain every day. He would say that. He was great at masking it because you would never know, but I knew, he was in a tremendous amount of pain every day. And so, that contributed to this. his
And
depression.
he was like a master builder.
He was,
that?
yeah. Yes, he had an incredible talent, very artistic, and so he would make custom furniture. He was a very, very hardworking man.
So after he passed away, what was grieving like to you?
You know, every person's journey is different in how they grieve. And I found it interesting how my grieving process took place. So on that first day, of course, obviously, there was a lot of shock and a lot of tears. You know, I was in Dallas. I was supposed to fly back. My mom and my sister had to drive me back. I was in no condition to fly back. And it was just all of a blur. I wasn't eating. I was not taking care of myself. I mean, literally somebody had to remind me to breathe almost. And I got back in. I stayed with my sister-in-law for a good 3 weeks because I just wasn't ready to return back to my home yet. He passed away in our home, you know, by himself. And so just to go back was too painful. But I had, thankfully, the supportive family around me that helped me. I want to make mention before I go into how the grieving process happened for me, because the amount of grace that the Lord showed me was truly incredible. I had never, ever in my entire life felt God's grace on me as powerfully as I did after my husband died. You know, in 2 Corinthians, it talks about that his grace is sufficient, and it was beyond sufficient. There's no possible way, Leanna, that I could have done what I was doing without God's grace resting on me.
It's just like his hands picking you up and carrying you through.
Oh, absolutely. I remember thinking, I'm scared. I don't want to go. I don't want to live alone. I've never in my entire life lived alone. And I was, you know, frightful for, you know, people breaking in the house or just, you know, having anxiety about normal things that you have when you live alone. And when I got back to my home, finally, all of that was gone. All of the fear had subsided. The Lord just brought in that peace and that reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And being a stay-at-home homeschool mother, and he was the only breadwinner for the family, I knew that I had to work. Well, prior to him passing away, this is a part that I didn't mention, I actually worked in real estate for a little while for a friend of mine in Upper Amarillo. I just did it just to make a little bit of side extra money for some things that I wanted. It wasn't really to help pay bills. And she had always prompted me, you need to get your real estate license. And I was like, well, you know, my husband doesn't really want me to get my license because he feels like it's going to detract from homeschooling, and I didn't do it. But finally, I convinced George. I said, look, I need to get my license. They're offering free classes right now, so it's not going to cost us anything.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. So I was able to get free classes, and I got licensed in December of 2022. And then in March of 23 is when he passed, because I told him, if God forbid, if anything should ever happen to you, I need something to fall back on. And the Lord knew. He knew and was preparing me, and I didn't know it the whole time. But so I had my real estate license, and I thought, okay, well, now I've got to get busy to start making some money.
Yes.
So I joined up with a team out of Dallas, and I hit the ground running hard. And at the beginning, within the first 3 months, I just did nothing but work.
Because you're trying to cope, right? I mean,
Right.
Do you think you were feeling that time? Because you're like, this is painful, but I got to keep myself moving.
Yes. I really thought that, you know, if I can just focus on this work, I need to get some income. And starting a real estate business from scratch in the middle of grieving is not probably something I would recommend. But I knew that I had no other choice. I didn't have any other back. And my convictions about homeschooling my daughter were so strong that it wasn't an option for me to go get a 9-to-5 and put her in public school. So I thought I have to do something that's going to allow me to stay home. And so I, like I said, hit the ground running. And that was about 3 months of that. And then around 3 months is when things changed, and I met somebody, and a gentleman that I met online. And it was never my plan to get into a relationship so soon. But because I had already, in a sense, grieved the death of my marriage for so many years, I felt like at that time I was ready to move on. George and I had discussed before, years prior, you know, you always just think as a couple, do you want me to remarry? Like, what do you know?
Like if you ever pass, you know.
Yeah. And so we had talked about it, and he was like, no, I want you to remarry.
I'm sure that brought comfort in that fact that you're like, okay, I can move on.
Right. Yeah. And I was ready. And I was only, 43 or 44 whenever he passed. So I was still very young. And I had, like I said, never lived alone. So I didn't know what that was like. And that scared scared me. I did not want to experience.
You don't want that responsibility. It's not financial. It's emotional. It's everything physical. Everything is on you.
So I met this gentleman and we started dating. And at first I thought, oh man, look what the Lord has done.
Look what the Lord.
And during that first 3 months of our relationship, everything was going well. And then another blow came when the church that I was attending, through circumstances, actually closed down. So the people that I had been going to for the past couple of months for support, to lean upon them and to go to church and just to have that fellowship with believers around me, dispersed. The church closed down and another church came in and took it over.
So it's kind of another loss.
Yes, right. Another loss. And I felt really scattered and without my support system after that happened. And I began to experience a lot of anxiety, which is a symptom of grief. And I thought it was just the grief coming in, but I would lay down at night and I would wake up in the morning and I remember sometimes just shooting up out of bed. I can't be with this man. Like it was so strong of a conviction inside of me. In those times of at least the first year of grieving, your brain goes through something chemically different. And I really believe that I was not firing on all cylinders when I was thinking. And so I just kind of pushed it aside and said, this can't be what I think it is. It's just the grief speaking. Everything's fine. And I had women that had lost their husbands before me tell me, slow down. You don't want to make a huge decision like this, because we had talked about getting married already after 3 months.
Okay, so it was quick, right?
It was very quick. And I said, if one more person tells me to slow down, I'm going to slap them.
It's like, stop it. Stop.
Right. They would prove to be right. But through that experience of that relationship, I came to realize that it was actually the Holy Spirit was warning me about this relationship that I was in. It was like the enemy sent me a counterfeit.
It sounds just like the enemy, right?
Yeah.
Especially in your time of your greatest fallout, really.
Right.
You're struggling, you're grieving, and the enemy says, okay, sin crouches at the door, right? Waiting to come in. And then when we least expect it, it's kind of this slap in the face.
Yep, that's exactly what it felt like. And so I made the brave decision to finally end that relationship, and I'm so thankful and glad that I did. Because it was almost like the Lord said, okay, now I think you're ready to receive what I have for you.
You have been listening to the radio podcast of Voices of a Woman from Creative Encouragement Ministries. My guest today was Theresa Theriot, and she opened up about the sudden death of her first husband and how she started walking out her grief journey. We will continue this heartfelt conversation in the next episode as she shares how God brought joy in the morning. This radio podcast focuses on giving women a voice to share their stories and how the Lord brought them through challenging situations to live above their circumstances. For more information about Voices of a Woman, Creative Encouragement Ministries, and to listen to more radio podcasts, visit us on Facebook at Creative Encouragement and on Instagram at Creative Encouragement 247. You can also find us on YouTube and Spotify. Creative Encouragement, encouraging women and connecting lives.